How's it going, everyone? Mel from FortinAmps here, and in this video, we are back at it again with Phil Pluskota. If you didn't watch our last video with Phil, you should go ahead and check that out. And if you don't know who Phil is a fantastic producer from the Bay Area, providing guitar tone and fantastic slamming high-gain mixes for the metal community and rock musicians alike. This video is part 2 of our 3-part series with Phil, and in this video, we're going to be going over Phil's biggest aha moment in guitar, his hybrid workflow, what Phil believes to be the top inspiring guitar tones of the industry, his take and approach to extended range guitar players, as well as going over his at-home recording philosophy and mixing philosophy. So with all that being said, let's jump into it.
What do you think is your biggest aha moment in your production journey?
My biggest aha moment? Honestly, I think my biggest aha moment was literally when I discovered being able to dial in tones with the tones panned left and right. But when it comes to mixing, a lot of it came down to just proper gain staging. Proper gain staging just makes everything so much cleaner sounding, but you're also able to get things to punch just as hard as you were when you were just driving the shit out of everything. But it just sounds more cohesive and just sounds just more well put together. So gain staging is such an important thing that a lot of people kind of, I think, overlook or gloss over, just because they're going to be like, oh, I can just turn it down later when I send everything to my buses. But what are you sending to those buses first? If everything's redlining, you're already out of headroom and you're just crushing everything to death.
Yeah, and that signal gets clipped progressively, especially if you're not looking at each individual plugin, if they're clipping or not.
But that's one of the things I like so much about having a hybrid workflow is because I have so much outboard gear that if I do want to hit them a little hard, they're so much more forgiving than plugins.
I remember recording stuff to a cassette tape when I started as a kid. And I was like, why does it sound thick still? Even though it's just 58 into my dad's karaoke system. And then as soon as it's it would clip, but it didn't sound as messed up as it did if I clipped in a digital ecosystem.
Yeah, I know, because when you run out of headroom digitally and you start clipping digitally, it's the worst sound ever. But when you're going into actual circuits and you clip circuits, it sounds great. Anytime I'm going through a distressor and I see the red line come up, I'm like, oh, sick. I know it's going to sound great once it's printed.
Oh, so there's sauce, more sauce.
It's always about the sauce.
What are you stoked on right now in guitar or guitar amps or anything?
So, I mean, right now, I'm pretty stoked on some of the new additions that I just got into the studio. Literally today, before we started this, I huffed up this MLC Sub-Zero V into the studio. Will Putney told me it was a sick amp, and a few other guys that I'm friends with told me it was a sick amp. So Merrick was kind enough to send me one of these guys. And then I've recently got a Diesel Hagen that I'm super, super pumped on. I've had it for a couple months, but that amp has been getting a lot of use lately because I just didn't have that diesel sound before. But between that, the new Dean Costello Heavy Metal Warfare that I just got in, and then hopefully this MLC will be sick once I fire it up, which as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to be firing that baby up and letting everyone know how sick it is.
I know you talked about a few producers and guitar players in our conversation already, but I guess top 3 inspiring guitar players or guitar tones that you've heard in your lifetime.
I mean, the number one that comes to mind almost instantly is going to be the tone from Bury Your Dead's record that Mark Lewis and Sukoff did. The guitar tone on that record is probably one of the best sounding guitar tones ever. And that tone right there was one of the ones that really got me into wanting to make sure that my guitar sounded that sick. And then of course, anything that Andy Sneap was a part of always sounded great. The Ills of Modern Man record that he did with the Spies Icon, that record is why I bought a JSX, because he said he used that amp on that record and the guitar tone in that record just slays. So I literally bought that amp solely off the fact he said he used it on that record, not because I wanted it for any other reason. And then I guess a last one would be anything that Zeus does. Zeus has always been one of my favorite mixers and producers when I was growing up, and then also getting into recording, because all the stuff he did with Acacia Strain, Wormwood and Continent, those 2 records have some of the best rectifier guitar tones you'll ever hear, period.
Do you find yourself really having to accommodate for drop tune players and extended range players more than just traditional 6-string drop C, drop D player?
Yeah, I mean, like you have to definitely look at the tones that you're dialing a little bit differently than you would when you're going to be in like a more normal tuning, something that's like, like regular A all the way up to standard E. But any of like the double drop tunings, anything like in G or below, you definitely want to go through amplifiers that are voiced a lot tighter, but also a lot more modernly voiced. Because one of the things I've noticed with a lot of like the extended range scale instruments, as well as really, really low tune instruments, is you get this really, really weird mid-range buildup. And the only way to really combat that is with some of like the newer, like modern amps, like my Omega Grandifier, for example. That amplifier I use all the time for really, really low tune stuff, just because it's such a tight amp and it's got such a good modern voice, but it's still aggressive. So it really tailors itself well to that. I mean, the Diesel does really good for that also. But yeah, whenever you're looking at like super like double drop tunings or really low tunings, you definitely want to make sure you're using an amplifier that's more modernly voiced, because it'll open up the mid-range a little bit more, make it a little bit easier for you to actually set it in the mix once you get a guitar tone going for that.
In one of our previous conversations, we were texting each other. You told me that some of your latest reamps were done in your apartment complex.
Yeah, so basically like a lot of the guitar tones I've done over the last like year and a half have been in an apartment. For a little bit of time, I was just using my aux box because I was kind of nervous to actually use cabinets in my apartment because I didn't want to like disturb my neighbors or to irritate anybody. But I had a couple big jobs come up that I needed to use real cabinets for. So I just rolled the dice and started using my cabinets again in the apartment, and I got zero complaints from anybody. So literally for the last, like, I'd say a year, I've been turning my cabinets up pretty decently in my apartment complex. Nobody has said anything. And honestly, I've gotten some of the best guitar tones I think I've ever gotten in here, which is pretty amazing. But even before like I moved here, like, I was, as most people know, I was working out of a garage, and it wasn't the best treated room by any means, but I still was able to dial in world-class tones in that room with, not the best circumstances. Same thing with the apartment I'm in now. Like, I'm able to dial in guitar tones that are world-class and not have any weirdness with the tones. They all sound awesome. A lot of like my newest records that are coming out that I've mixed are all done in this apartment.
I think that's just like a huge testament. I think the tones that you've made since I first heard about you, like, I think, was that like 2018, and to now, like, all of the tones sound like stellar. Like, I reference those tones like frequently when I'm making these videos. If there's any tips that you could get for people getting good at home guitar tone.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you're at. Like, you just learn your environment. Like, once you learn your environment and you know how to translate things the way you want them to translate, like, you can literally get a good sound anywhere. And from all the years of me doing audio and then making guitar tones, like, every place I've ever had to mic up a cabinet and get guitar tones out of, I've been able to dial in sick guitar tones out of. And it's just from years and years of just knowing my amplifiers, knowing my cabinets, and then just figuring out a room just by standing in it and listening to an amplifier being played. So a lot of it has to just come down to just listen and use your ears. I know everyone hears that all the time, but it's true. Use your ears, train your ears, and then just go for it. Like, don't be afraid of it sounding bad, because once you know it sounds bad, you can figure out why it sounds bad and fix it and make it better.
I guess if you want me to kind of like put that, did you do a lot of like A/B testing? Did you reference a lot of records, or did you kind of just make a record, go, oh, I didn't really like that, I'm just going to try again, and then do another thing and like step up? Or
so when I first started, I would reference records all the time and I would listen to them. But at a point I was like, my stuff doesn't sound like anything that I'm referencing. So why should I just listen to other people's stuff while I'm trying to make a record? Because like, I know referencing is great. Like, if you just want to kind of like hear like how your stuff compares to other records, but for the most part, I don't do any record referencing anymore. I just listen to the songs and I just go for it. Like, whatever my gut is telling me to go with, whatever sound is in my head for the material that I'm given, I just go the direction that my ears are taking me in. But if a band has like a specific like sound in mind that they're going for and they tell me that, then of course I'm going to go with what their suggestion is, and then we just kind of work it out from there.
when a band tells you, hey, we want to sound like this record, do you go like, oh, well, I'm going to use that guitar chain from this record and see like, and use that as a starting point? Or do you still really bring it back home to their playing and what amp complements what they do?
I bring it back home to their playing. Because like, even if you were to use the same exact rig from a record that they love, they're not those guitar players that are on that record. So the only thing you can do is find a combination that can get you close to that without completely trying to copy that sound. But that's usually what I try to do, is like, if someone gives me like a specific tone reference, I'll definitely sit there and try to figure out what combinations of cabs and amps is going to get me to that particular sound without having to look and see what was already previously used. Because all I'm really doing is just listening to how it translates. So, because like if I use like, say they use like a Randall Satan in a Mesa cabinet and I go to use the same thing and the sound is completely different, I'm going to try to figure out a way to get the sound closer to what they're looking for, but with a completely different setup.
I really love how your philosophy is always tailored to the music and the player. Because that, in my opinion, really brings it back home to like the artist and how things are supposed to translate and how you're going to put a magnifying glass on the player and what they're trying to like communicate.
Yeah, because like, you know, every band is unique. Every band is their own thing, even if they, you know, are within a specific genre. And yeah, of course, there's like, you know, certain tropes to certain genres that like you have to like kind of fit yourself into. But at the end of the day, everyone's art is their art. So using templates, using presets, or kind of like trying to like repeat something that's already been done, it's always been kind of boring to me because it's not inspiring. But all I want to do is just really just pull out that band sound. Because if you go to see that band live, they're not going to sound like the bands that they're influenced by. They're going to sound like themselves. So trying to get the band to sound the most like themselves on a record is always the most important thing.